Welcome to Replayable, where we go into depth on our favorite tabletop games that keep us coming back again and again. I'm the start player, Todd, and today I'm joined by Greg and Paul. For our 36th episode, we'll be heading into space, researching technologies and colonizing planets in Beyond the Sun. Hey, just so you know, starting this podcast is a basic spacefaring action.
Yeah, I'm going to have to take advanced robotics.
Yeah, we're not having much left with research here. We're just going to be colonizing.
I think that might actually work. We'll talk about it in a second. Beyond the Sun is a space exploration board game where players guide humanity's expansion into the stars. Each player controls a faction working to research new technologies, colonize planets, and improve their economy. The game centers around a shared technology tree, allowing players to unlock advancements as well as new action selection spaces that shape their progress. The game ends when 4 achievement discs have been placed on the milestone cards. In my mind, this game released with moderate fanfare, maybe somewhat subdued, because it was 2020. What brought this game to your attention while we were all, watching Ted Lasso and doing social distancing?
Well, for me, I think this was probably the first game that was introduced to me via BGA. I know that I think Dave had already had a copy on pre-order or something like that, and he received it, but obviously we couldn't meet in person. But it was available on BGA, and we tried it out pretty early on. And I think we got 2 or 3 plays of it on there before we finally started to play it in person. And so that was a kind of a unique thing for it, that it was, most of the games I played on BGA were games I already knew.
Right? Interesting.
Yeah, I feel like I had no clue about its release. And after the pandemic settled, people started meeting up again. Dave said, "Hey, look at this Rio Grande game I got. They're doing so good with train games. I decided to try out this space game too. Let's play it." I was like, all right.
It's interesting that you say that Rio Grande had been doing well with train games, and so then you got a space game. I also feel like Rio Grande has been carving out a niche for themselves with space games in particular. I mean, if you look at some of their more recent titles, you have Jump Drive, Beta Colony, New Frontiers, and then Beyond the Sun, and they've even had some since then. Do you think of Rio Grande Games as the space game company at this point?
Wow.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
For me, they've had 2 smash hits with space theme, so it's possible. They're definitely a front runner in my mind for recent releases.
Right.
I feel like they published old games for a while, and now just in the past, like you said, the past about 5 years, they've really started to come back as a premier game publisher for the games that I like to play. I haven't played as many of them as I'd like to, but I'm always interested in things like, New Frontiers and Evacuation. And, we've played Space Station Phoenix. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it as like, oh, they're going space games now.
But when you look at the list of titles, that is a thing that they've carved out, or at least they understand that there is a market there, or maybe it's just we're overly correcting towards space.
Well, what I think makes them stand out is they are not making board games based on existing IP. They're doing their own thing.
Yeah. And they're also not making board games based on potentially touchy subjects of, historical European history,
Right. But I guess my point was that the other new space games coming out are based on movies or video games or already established popular things. And Rio Grande's games are like, hey, we're trying this new thing out.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of the games that we've been playing are games that have exploding or expanding combinatorial possibilities, right?
Oh, my God.
Don't get me started.
Oh, no, I'm getting you started.
Touchy subject.
So where are the combos in this game? Because I feel like they have to be there.
Well, my gripe with
We're going to go straight there.
This is it.
My gripe with the combo zeitgeist is that you have these games that are like, we want every player to be involved. We want to minimize downtime. Everybody's going to have these micro turns so that everybody feels like they're constantly doing something. They don't have to wait a long time. And then they put in all this combo bonus add-on stuff where it's like you do one thing and then that immediately lets you do something else before anybody else can act, which immediately lets you do something else chain reaction. Oh, look, my turn has taken 5 minutes when it's supposed to be these 15-second actions. And I hate that.
But it's so fun to build that chain of combos. How can you not love
for
that?
For 1 out of the 4 players.
Yeah, for the one whose turn it currently is, sure.
Oh, I've been on the bad end of that, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if Beyond the Sun has
There's
many
a
of
little
those.
bit.
I mean,
There's a little
they
bit.
have...
When you colonize, you get some reward. Whenever there's technologies, when you research them, you get some reward. But it's definitely on the small side. It's a single extra
small.
action. It's
and
not.
Then the advanced boards for each faction have a little bonus action you can get once or twice a game.
So they're combos, but they're manageable ones. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's single action, instance.
If by combo you mean the chain reaction,
yes.
It's a very small chain reaction that's not going to balloon your turn very big.
Yeah, I would say it's not even a chain. It's you get an extra action, a single extra action. Like, you'll complete a research technology and you'll get to put a ship on the board and do 2 moves, or you'll get to colonize a planet and you get to now also add some more ships on the board or something like that.
Yeah, and then sometimes if you got a free jump, then there's a planet that happens to be down, which gives you a control bonus.
True.
And
that happened in our last game, by the way, Greg.
you can get like 3 actions out of a single turn.
Okay, there's a third. Yes, there is a way to get a third. Okay. But it is limited, and it doesn't spiral the game out of control, or it doesn't snowball much.
Okay. I think I agree with that. By the way, when it happened in the game, of course, I remember because I was the one person that was happy it was happening. But it was like research a technology which gave me wormholes, which allowed me to make 2 jumps, which provided me the opportunity to do a planet control.
And then it triggered your faction ability.
Right. So it was... perhaps
fourth.
Yeah, but I mean, it perhaps was an unusual as opposed to the expected, and it needed a lucky draw to get it started. It wasn't anything I had planned for. I think it's manageable.
Right. Well, and the question I would have is, in doing those, did you take away much opportunity from other players? Obviously, in getting control of a planet, if somebody else had control, you took their ability to colonize that away. But other than that, you're probably not affecting what other people can do much from having done that.
Right.
No, that's a good point.
I will say, though, that we were playing with the expansion, and the expansion adds more chain reactions with the leaders cards.
Correct.
Yeah, I've only played 1 game with leaders cards. It's been a while, so I don't really remember too much how they affect that kind of thing.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that in a moment.
Right.
But Paul, you mentioned the advanced version of the game even has some asymmetry in there. So what are your thoughts about that? Is it a good thing, or do you prefer the basic version?
So I guess to briefly touch on the differences, the basic version, everybody has an identical faction board, except that each board will tell you get a slightly different starting bonus.
Right.
Either a ship in deep space or an extra resource or an extra person. The advanced game, everybody's starting point is identical. However, as you play, the faction boards diverge, and some give you mid-game bonuses. Others have different production or automation advancements for you to pursue. So I think, unlike many games that come to mind, it is a true advanced version where if you've played a few times and you want to add some chaos to the game because you feel you want to shake it up, it's a great way to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if I would even call it chaos. Variance. It's because it's mostly deterministic game. I think the biggest chaotic element is the players themselves.
Oh, for sure. There are a couple of events that you can uncover when you research a technology that will have you roll a die, right? And if you roll a good, then take a good. If you roll a ship, then take a ship or something like that. But
yeah, I guess that's true. I was wrong. What the advanced game does is it encourages players to strategically aim in a direction.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a little more, forces a little more divergence of play style.
Okay, so in my mind, I think of those as swim lanes, right? So I'm going to focus in a particular area, and we're going to talk about strategies in a moment. But if I'm doing that, then you might be focused in a little different area where we're not going to run into each other as much. Do you think they're trying to coordinate players into a less conflicting game?
So there is a faction that really encourages you to focus on the space exploration and expansion board. But I think in the basic game, it's still very much nudging. The expansion game factions, however, it's a forceful push in one direction.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. It's much more forceful. I agree with that. It's probably more accurate to say they encourage you to go in one faction makes it easier to generate lots of ore. One other one makes it easier to generate high population. Another makes it easier to generate ships. So it kind of hints that, well, you should go in this direction, but you absolutely can adjust to whatever the technologies are that come out. And maybe your game isn't going to be what your faction makes easy. That part's just going to be easy for you, but you're still going to go heavy into research, even though you could explore more easily than other people.
Yeah, for example, in our last game, I was the hive mind, and I think that I never jumped. I was pure science.
How did that work out for you?
He won.
Of course.
It worked out well.
I'm like thinking, oh, he went counter type.
So then what are the viable strategies? Clearly, if you're the hive mind, you can focus purely on science and ignore jumping in colonization and pretty much the entire exploration board. I think you colonized one planet.
I did? Are you sure about that?
I thought you had. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think so. I got 2 level 4 technologies.
Okay.
I'm positive I didn't colonize a planet. And I think in a normal game, though, you want to get a few colonies and 1 level 4 tech to do well.
Yeah, I think a balanced game generally is what's going to win, but there are those exceptions. I think the game allows for somebody who dominates the exploration board to win or dominates the research board. You kind of have to play against somebody dominating either one of those. It does become overpowered if somebody is able to take control of everything and, be the first to all the research technologies or, have an overwhelming presence on the exploration board, and it's hard to get much income from your own ships, let alone colonize anything.
Yeah, I think the designer telegraphs that with the achievements. You always play with Transcendence and Empire. So it's telling you right away, hey, either go for a lot of tech or try to get 4 colonies.
And so those are the only 2 strategies that you're really going to pursue.
Well, I think the Empire strategy, in my experience, makes it almost impossible to get a level 4 technology, unless it's a slow game. Now, this game the game duration is player defined.
Which is great.
Right.
So if everybody wants to slow down, I guess you could possibly do both. But in my experience, if you're going to get 4 colonies, you will not have time to also get a level 4 tech.
Yeah, I think mostly it encourages diversity. If somebody is doing well towards Empire, don't race them towards it. Go, I think you need to be fighting for one or the other, but don't fight for both because it's going to be hard to get. Like Paul says, almost impossible to get both. And in doing so, you're probably going to be falling behind on other things. You're not going to keep up with the other players. But if you focus on one of them, I don't know. I always feel like I end up doing a level 4 technology no matter whatever I start to do at the start of the game or intend to do at the start of the game. It feels hard not to go for that.
Right.
It's usually worthwhile, and it puts pressure on the other scientists. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if we've had a game that... I know we have. I'm certain that we've had a game that was won by an Empire, but...
I'm not sure it was won without getting at least 1 level 4 technology along the way. Because like the last game, I got Empire, and I did not have a level 4 technology.
Right.
I got close, but I did not win. And I had been focusing...
Yeah, you just run out of time.
Right. And I'd been focusing on getting power onto the board and then colonizing. And I had an ability due to the expansion that made it easier for me to basically have a ship that was 1 level higher than it was marked as being. And that +1 transferred. So if I colonized with that ship, then it transferred to my next, another ship of my choice. So it was easier for me to get to colonizing levels. And it still wasn't fast enough to win while I was in the lead.
Well, and maybe it's best just to say that this is a game that encourages players to try to fill whatever the niche is that other players aren't doing. If other players aren't putting a lot of ships out, well, then you should be doing that because it's an opportunity. But the converse of that is you can't let somebody run away with it. Because I know we've had games that my lesson learned from them was, we really let somebody dominate that exploration board and they won because nobody was challenging them. Nobody was slowing them down.
Right. Yeah, especially in a 3-player game.
Yeah. It's hard to say that there's a single viable strategy or only 2 strategies. I think it's really dependent on the game state. Because
there's focus on science, there's focus on colonization, and then there's mixed. And I feel like most of the time you pursue a mixed strategy.
Yeah. I think you kind of have to, if only to balance out some, keeping somebody from running away with one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Now that makes a lot of sense, and also is something that we failed to do in the last game.
Well, another thing you have to think about is the tactical realities of what research is being done and what technologies are appearing on the collective tech tree.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because one person defines a technology for a specific spot in the tech tree, and that's permanent. Nobody can ever change that.
Yeah, and they might take the strong abilities, the cheap abilities to colonize out of the game.
Right.
So now a colonization game is just too expensive.
Right. Or I think what Dave was saying after the last game was, maybe players can try to put a color that the scientists don't like on there, like red. Just try to put more red text out to get in their way.
Right. So you can filter, in a way, the colors. If you research a level 2 technology, or I think it's more level 3, where you're going to have 2 level 2s that are contributing to it, and you get to choose, like if you're coming off of the yellow, you'll draw until you get 2 yellow cards, but now you have the option of saying, okay, I'm going to pick either a yellow with what the second color is going to be. And so you could filter out colors that would be advantageous for a scientist or someone, if you're the scientist on the military side, you could not choose a card that's going to have red as a secondary color.
Right.
And basically filter it out of the game.
Exactly. So even though you say yellow or you're forced to pick a yellow card, that's just a yellow input.
Right.
And you could effectively choose a red, green, or blue card with a yellow input to it.
Potentially.
Exactly.
I think it's more when you have 2 color inputs, you have a red and a yellow input, you can specifically say, well, no, I'm going for reds.
Right.
And you could try to eliminate the yellow. It's a little harder to do it the other way, I think.
Yeah, because it's a luck of the draw, right? You're just taking the first 2 with half of the input being the color you selected.
Right.
Correct.
But yeah, so I don't know how much players in the games we've played had really paid attention. I think it's usually more beneficial to focus on trying to get a good card that's going to be good for you, either an immediate bonus that you're going to get when you research it, or something that fits into your strategy. If you're trying to do colonization, you want to find that strong colonization card that's going to make it easier for you to get your empire built.
Yeah, I think this game really imposes a anxiety about tempo.
Oh yeah, it's a race, isn't it?
Like, oh my God, when is this game going to end? It's right around the corner. It could end in 2 more turns. So any kind of tempo play you can get, I'm always looking at the immediate benefits of the tech when I select which one I want, because I don't even know if I'm going to be able to have time to take the action.
Yeah, I mean, this game, I know it's not technically a race game, but it often feels like a race because those bonus cards, those are what end the game. And those are what you're always watching. Is somebody going to get their marker on one of the bonus cards? Because that's...
You mean the achievements, Greg?
Achievements, yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, the end game achievements there. It's because it's when the markers, I forget what it is. It's what, number of players plus 1 marker or plus 2 markers?
It's number of players, I think, unless you're playing 2 players and then it's 3.
You only can expect to get, on average, 1 marker out there, but you want to be the guy that gets a second marker or maybe even a third somehow. And it's a race to get those. And so even though ultimately it's whoever scores highest that wins, being the first to those often means you're in a better winning position.
I think it's the 4th achievement disc, regardless of player count.
Wait, what? Say that again?
It's the 4th disc being placed.
You guys played this just a week ago, so
right.
You don't have an excuse.
That's for 4-player game, Todd.
I just took that right out of the rules.
If you go to the setup for 2 or 3 players section, it says for 3 players, only 3 achievement discs are needed to trigger the last round, and the same is true for 2 players. So 2 and 3, it's 3 achievement discs.
Okay.
Mm.
We'll just edit this section out. Don't worry.
This section's going to get totally edited.
Snip, snip.
Oh, wait, Todd was wrong. Snip, snip.
Sometimes I allow myself to be wrong, especially when it's funny. This isn't funny. Oh, okay. All the way at the end.
You found it.
Yeah, set up for 2 or 3 players.
Yeah, page 25. There we go.
Yeah.
We played it correctly.
Only 3 achievement discs are needed during the last round of the game. Okay.
Yeah, so there is that race aspect to the game that adds that tension, even though you still need to have the best score when the race is over.
Right. I like the idea of a tempo, and I remember there was a point in our last game where I could place the 3rd achievement disc and end the game, or I could try to improve my points, but if I did that by trying to colonize another planet, I could basically see the number of rounds I would need to get there, right? I was going to have to do something to put another ship on the board, and then I was going to have to jump there, and then I was going to have to take the colonization. So I was 3 rounds away from being able to do that. And I thought, before I could do that, someone else is going to finish one of those achievements and end the game. So I went ahead and ended it early.
And even if they don't finish an achievement, how many points are they going to be able to generate in that same time?
Exactly.
So
I totally agree with the idea of a tempo.
Yeah, regarding the tempo, I just do want to say that I feel like I've lost the game when I take the 4th basic spacefaring action, which is grow a person.
I love when games have an action like that,
and gain 1 resource. It's like, you don't have anything better to do,
Yeah.
or more likely, you've put yourself in a position where you don't have the resource to do anything good. So here's a get out of jail card that's going to put you behind everybody else.
Yeah, I think I had to take that once in our game.
Yeah, it's kind of that space of shame.
Exactly. I hold my head and take the produce action.
Right.
Yeah, well, in the last game I played, I think there might have even been 2 turns that I had to... Oh, no, one time I took the... Anyway, there was the other action that allows you to take a bonus basic spacefaring action. But anyways, yeah, I had to take the basic... that.
What's that, the Terraforming Guild?
The Technocrats Guild?
That's it.
Where you get to research and do another basic spacefarer.
Yeah. But yeah, I had to take that action, and I remember feeling like, oh, that's it. I've lost tempo. I'm out of this game. I ended up winning that game by 10 points, though. So, but because of that, the whole game, I felt like, well, maybe I've caught up, but I felt like I had lost tempo, and there was no way I was, really fighting for the win.
So you won, but you didn't enjoy it. That's what I'm hearing.
I won, but I didn't feel like I was winning. I didn't have that. And I probably griped too much while doing it.
Well, I had the exact same experience on Board Game Arena this week. I was in a game. I had to take the produce action. I was like, I'm fighting for second. And then the game ended, and I got an award. I'm like, what? How did this happen? And I won on tiebreaker, which I couldn't believe it.
What is the tiebreaker?
I don't remember. BGA doesn't tell you. It just
that was great.
It randomly determined. No,
it just tells you, oh, your tiebreaker score was this, and I'm like, okay, I don't understand it.
All right, what is the value of a person versus a good versus a 1 power on a ship? And I realize there's a temporal value. If you need ore right now, then you're going to prioritize ore. But what about the value between the other two? Is there something that you should be keeping in mind or trying to do? How do you maximize the balance of resources in this game?
Oh, as an aside, your production is your tiebreaker. The number of discs you've removed from your production area.
Okay. So not your automation track, but your production track.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I think the answer really depends on how long the game's been going on. And I say that because early on, it's super easy to get people.
Mm-hmm.
But past the midway point, you can be, person locked, where you just have not increased your food production to the point where you can unlock the cubes the rows above them.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general terms, I think I would rank them in ore is the least valuable, then people, then ships. But like he said, it is because towards middle of the game, it starts to get hard to produce population. And towards the end of the game, it can become almost impossible, where you're depending on special actions that bypass the production rules to get cubes on either ships or population.
Yeah, so sometimes I feel like I have to plan 2-3 moves ahead. How many people I need.
Right?
Yeah, it's one of the really interesting challenges of the game is how do you juggle that? There are times that I'll take an action just to spend the cubes to get them back on the board. I'll colonize a planet that I didn't want to colonize yet because I need those ships back on the board so I can make population this turn so that I can research something next turn.
Yeah, that is a nice thing about the exploration board is you can get those cubes back into the queue. Whereas on the tech tree, the science board, those dice are never coming back.
They're gone.
I've just had a Space of Shame flashback there. I remember why I had to use the Space of Shame, and it was because I was going to colonize, and Dave went and put a couple of his ships on the planet, so I couldn't colonize it. I didn't have the cubes to do anything else. Anyway. So I needed to. Anyway, it was a shameful thing.
Yeah, it's funny because I think some people compare this to a 4X game.
Yeah. Oh, and he, I think, put his cubes on the action that I wanted to take to move my ships or something like that.
Yeah, there's no extermination, but you can block other players by equaling or exceeding their strength.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that cube economy, whether they're population or ships, is one of the big balancing acts of the game, trying to make sure that you have the population you need to research or to colonize. And the ore engine just kind of falls into the background by mid-game. If you don't have an you're in trouble.
I would say the first few turns, ore is more important than people.
Yeah.
Right.
But after that, it becomes less important or easier to get.
Yeah, if you've managed to figure out a way. I've also had those games where I couldn't get ore I couldn't generate ore well for anything. But that was just poor play, I think. I didn't plan ahead enough on making sure I had the ore production available.
Hence why my first action was advanced robotics.
Paul, you said some people call this a 4X game, but it doesn't really feel like one.
It's not a 4X game. I mean, it's got a couple of the elements of it. You definitely have exploration, and you could call it exploitation because you're getting when you put your production disks out on those planets, that increases your resource generation. So there's your exploitation, but there is no extermination, and what is the fourth X?
Expand.
Expand. Yeah, and maybe colonizing is expanding, but it's so abstracted that it doesn't feel like, to me at least, it doesn't feel like a 4X game at all.
Automating is also expanding. I think it's definitely there. I don't know. This game does remind me of games like Eclipse.
Oh, we're going to get there.
I think... What's that?
Well, I mean, we're going to get there in the prompts. What does it remind you of?
Oh. Unless
you're saying you didn't pick Eclipse as your most recognizable comparison.
well, we'll get there when we get there. I think the biggest thing that makes this game different is that the tech tree is communal or collective.
Yes,
absolutely.
And we're all monkeying with it at the same time.
And it's central to the game. I mean, it is arguably the single most important thing in the game. Actually, I can't imagine why you would argue against that. I think it's the single most important thing.
It definitely is. It defines how the game is going to be played, other than the initial achievements draw.
And the rest of what would be a 4X game is kind of abstracted out on this exploration board. The big difference there is when you colonize a planet, it's not taking space up that other people can't get to where they now have to explore further. It just goes away and something new replaces it automatically. So
exactly.
There's not really an exploration. There's just landing on a planet and colonizing it.
Yeah, the map doesn't get any easier. No one else can revisit it. It just disappears.
Nobody can take it away from you.
So it's a 2X game.
It kind of is.
Sure.
We've now stepped on several of the prompts, or at least hinted at them, so let's head on over there. The first one, weighting complexity on Board Game Geek's scale of 1 to 5, which also aligns with complexity on Board Game Arena. How would you rate the weight of Beyond the Sun? And Greg, I'll let you go first.
I debated this one. I'm going to give it a 4 because it is a complex balance. I think you can play it at a level 3 and have fun if everybody's kind of just playing it lightly. But when you start to get into that player balance issue of like, you've got to make sure that nobody else is running away with the game, and you've got to keep an eye on that race towards those achievements and think about, well, if I put this research out, is this actually going to be better for somebody else than me? It gets up into a 4 because there's just so much going on in the game at all the time that you should be keeping track of.
All right. Paul, what did you have it as?
I almost picked a 2, but I couldn't decide, so I gave it a 3. I mean, it's such a fast game.
It is.
I feel like it doesn't last long enough to be more than a 3.
But a potential 2? Really?
Yeah, I'm never...
fine with you putting it at 3, but saying that you almost did 2. Anyway.
Well, I didn't, so 3.
Well, I also had it at a 3, but I haven't won yet, so maybe I should be thinking of it as a 4. I understand what you're saying, Greg, and there are a lot of things to keep track of. And my thought was there are a lot of plates to keep spinning. Whether that's your automations so that you can get some ore, or you have a way to create people, which sounds kind of weird. What do we say? We're always like unboxing people because they're goods on the board and they need.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, and for me, the reason I felt like it kind of took that next step is like, I don't think a non-gamer would ever be really competitive at this game. I think like I said, I think it can be played at 3, and it is a fun, fast game, and probably a game that can be played quickly and without as much thought as I sometimes put into it, I guess. But I would never try to get my wife to play this game. And most 3 games, I feel like if it's the right theme, I could get her to play. But this one, you could put any theme on this, and she's never going to be interested in it.
Okay. So then strategy. How much do you think there's an opportunity for strategy and long-term planning? Go ahead, Greg.
Strategy, this one again was a borderline one, and I gave it a 4. I feel like I don't give enough 4s, and this one is one that I think you really do have to do the long-term planning. You have to decide where you want to go and start kind of committing to it pretty early on in the game.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be flexible with that strategy. You have to keep an eye on what other players are doing, but you really need to make sure that the net effect of your actions is still heading you towards whatever your vision for your strategy was from the beginning, because otherwise you're just going to end up with not enough accomplished at the end of the game.
I agree wholeheartedly, all the way down to the rating. So I also had it as 4, and having to choose your swim lane early and focus on the actions, automations, and technologies that help you do that. That's when you're going to see the best results. What did you have, Paul? I had it as a 2.
I thought about it.
It's a 2.
No, I waffled between 3 and 4 a lot, but because of how tight it is and how much and how far you have to plan ahead, I decided to give it a 4 as well.
Woohoo! All right. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Greg, about being flexible, but at the same time, I find it's difficult to make a mid-game alteration.
Well, but it's more about prioritization. Like, okay, I do want to colonize that planet, but this turn I need to get on that research, or I need to whatever. You need to maybe change your priority a little bit because there's an opportunity that's too good to pass up, or that, you need to take away from somebody else. Yeah, so that's kind of where it goes. Or maybe just as simple as the action that you want to take, somebody else is sitting on it.
Right. That happened a few times in our last game.
Yeah. And that's one of the great things about the game is that happens a lot. And
a little bit of work
because of that research element, it quickly becomes that you don't ever want to do a basic action again. And even the level 2 and level 3 actions that, open up, for colonization and research, you don't want to do those because they're expensive.
Right.
You want to make sure that you have most of your actions are actions that were opened up by research. And sometimes other people have the same plan.
Right. Absolutely. All right. So then luck. How much do you think luck plays a factor? Same scale, 1 to 5. Paul?
I thought a lot about this because I didn't want to give it this rating, but I had to. I give it a 1.
You gave it a 1, huh?
Because, the only luck is in the text you draw, and then even then you have a decision and a choice. So, yeah, I give it a 1.
I totally understand where you're coming from that. I waffled a little bit, but I gave it a 2 for exactly the reason you said, is that sometimes the texts that you get just aren't helpful to your position. And then somebody else will research and they'll get exactly the right thing that advances their game to the next level.
Right.
That doesn't define the game, but it can happen in the game. And so I did give it a 2.
Yeah, that did happen in our last play where I think it was Todd. He's like, man, if I could get a immediate bonus for a jump, that's the bee's knees. And
then I pull
but he didn't win.
and then I draw wormholes and get free jumps. Yeah.
It was a close game.
But you're right, Greg. I didn't win. And I had the same decision. There is not a lot of luck in this game. I would say in addition to the research actions you're picking, there's also the events when you're the one to research.
Yeah.
So that sometimes can add a little to it. There isn't a lot of luck in the game, but when it pops up, it can have a huge effect. And so I also gave it a 2.
Yeah.
We'll say a light 2. It's a 2.
Definitely. I think it's definitely one of those games where if you need a lucky draw, you were not headed towards a win in the first place. And
All right, theme. I'm really interested in this one for this particular game, same scale 1 to 5. And I'm not sure how it could be more space themed, but I'm going to go ahead and say a 4 anyway. There's something that I think is both elegant but also plain about using these custom dice that can be goods or workers or ships. I think the artwork is functional, but it's not all that inspiring. But then what do I expect from a tech tree? I'm not sure. I feel like it's simple and it could be a 5, but I'm giving it a 4. It should have been able to do more somehow. What did you guys have?
For me, it's a 3. I never feel sucked in by the story. I mean, I don't really even understand the story. We're factions trying to be spacefaring, but we don't actually contest with each other. We're just trying to be, better,
Right.
Look down on the others. So I don't know. If there was like a story and more, like you said, I think it could have been more thematic, but I'm not sure how.
I'm a little more towards Todd on this one. I mean, I get what you're saying, Paul, but for me, I like how well the mechanics of the game tie to the theme of the game. You need to have population to colonize a planet. You need to have food to feed them. You need to go find planets to generate that food on, or develop the technologies that can create food for you. It all blends together in this, everything kind of makes sense, where, you have population that you're going to train these guys as pilots and send them out to conquer the galaxy. It is very abstracted and there isn't a story behind it. And so, I absolutely couldn't give this a 5. But yeah, it connects for me. And I think this is an example of a game that would be hard to retheme. Not impossible, but because everything is intrinsically tied, the mechanics are tied to the theme and to me what feel like concrete ways.
Right. Okay. So then favorite player count. What is the game best played at? Paul?
I prefer it at 4 players. I think you want people contesting both the tech board and the exploration board, and 4 players makes it easy for them to be contested.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. So the idea is that maybe you have 2 people on the exploration board and 2 people contesting on the tech board, right?
Right.
But during our game, Dave and I were both on the exploration board, but there was enough room for us. We didn't really get in each other's way all that much.
Well, but I would say that that's because Paul didn't get on the exploration board much at all, it sounds like.
Right. He was not on there. I think
I think that you're supporting his point that a 3-player game has not enough conflict.
I just ran away with the tech board. Nobody impeded my progress, and I got 2 level 4 technologies.
Right. By the way, it's our own fault for not having done it, because using the expansion, the hive mind basically gets to put bonus markers on technologies. And did you get to choose those, Paul, or did...
Yeah, at the start of the game, I got to choose them.
You got to choose which ones you put them on. And
so I was basically putting flags out.
Right.
And if I was the person to take the flag, then I got a point for it.
And even knowing where he was going, we still ended up competing on the expedition board.
5 flags out, and I was able to pick up 4 of them.
Yeah, this game definitely has that I've noticed that it happens pretty regularly in this game, that once you kind of commit to exploration, if somebody comes and gets in your way, it's hard not to just immediately try to push back.
Right.
Because you feel like you've not only have you lost something, but now they're earning income from it, and maybe they're going to take that planet that you wanted to colonize. And so
well, that's something we didn't really talk about before. Some of those planets have amazing colonization bonuses, like Kasai's 4 ship in deep space for free.
Right.
Some of them have pretty good. I know that there was a planet that I was happy was taken from me in the last game I played because it had a great control bonus where it was like, okay, you took it from me. Great. I get to take it back next turn. Do you want to keep trading it like this? Because this is kind of fun.
It's a little bit like the worker bonus in Great Western Trail when you put one in as a station master and then you get to earn it again when you hire the next worker.
Yeah, getting to double dip on bonuses like that is always fun. I put this at a 3-player for fun, but I think it is a better, more competitive game at 4. I have more fun playing it at 3, but it's probably a better game at 4.
I also had it as 4. Does it need a 5th player?
No, it's already. Why I have more fun.
That's probably in the next expansion.
Yeah, the reason I have more fun at 3 is because I get surly with having things taken away from me on the board or on the exploration board, or not being able to take the action I want to take because somebody else stepped on it, and then I don't have to wait 2 turns for it because as soon as they're off of it, Paul's going to take it next turn, and that.
Oh, got it.
I think it takes away your ability to really play the game you want to play a little bit, and that's frustrating to me. But I think it's a better game for the reasons that Paul mentioned.
Okay. So then I think I can tell where we're headed for this next one. Least favorite player account. Does anyone have an answer that is not 2?
Mum.
It's fun-ish at 2. It's more of a, 2-player solitaire, and whoever does better wins.
Right. So then actual playing time, boxes can lie. And this one says, I believe it's 60 to 120, right? For 2 to 4 players, it's basically saying 30 minutes per player. Do you feel that that's accurate?
As always, I'll defer to the stats. I mean, it feels like a fast game. This is not a game that drags out and feels long. And so I would have a hard time believing that it is actually long, but
my recorded average time is 1 hour 40 minutes, and that's across all player counts.
1 hour 40?
Yeah, but I don't play at 2 players, so
that's for 3 and 4 player games. So
for 3 and 4 player, I average 1 hour 40.
Yeah, I have it at 3 player was 90 minutes and 4 player was an hour 45. So
sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
I think I have a few plays with the expansion, which inflated my average time.
Dave was telling me yesterday because we were debating after last night whether to try to play a 2-player game of it, and he was saying he had played a game or 2 that was under an hour. I don't know whether they were 2 or 3 players, but yeah, I mean, it's a fast game. If they're saying half hour per player, they're definitely not.
That might be overshooting. Yeah,
they're not trying to say that it plays faster than it really does.
Right.
It definitely, with fluency, easily can beat that.
Agreed. Expansions. I'm going to skip past the promo card. So there's really one at the moment, one expansion. That's Leaders of the New Dawn. And it adds new powers in the form of domestic and military leaders, which are drafted at the start of the game. I think it also adds some colonization possibilities. What are your thoughts about the expansion?
Well, it does come with 4 errated technology cards from the base game.
Right.
In my personal opinion, most notably mass cloning and stealth terraformers, which have broken games in my experience, so I'm really glad that they nerfed them. When it comes to all the other stuff in the expansion, I don't know how much I like the leaders. Especially the military leaders, they make it a little easier to achieve empire.
Right.
So I think that they could result in games with fewer turns. I feel like the leaders expansions should result in games having fewer turns, but those games still take more time because you're drafting the leaders and you have more to think about.
Right. And you have the combo possibilities.
Right.
How do you feel about the fact that some of the leaders have a limitation on the benefits? Like you have to put the counters on them and say, basically you have 2 charges of this power during the course of a game.
Yeah, twice per game, 3 times per game. I've never felt constrained by that limit, to be honest, because the game ends so quickly.
Interesting. And Greg, what do you think? Is it a must include?
I've only played with the leaders once, and it was a while ago. So my recollection is it predefines your strategy at the start of the game. I mean, obviously, you don't have to go using their abilities, but they tend to be powerful enough that you should.
Right.
So it kind of predefines your strategy at the beginning of the game in a way that I didn't find as fun. They're interesting, but I don't think the game needs them, is kind of how I feel. If you've played this game so much that you're getting tired of it, then I don't know that the expansion is going to make it more fun.
Well, I don't know if you ever noticed, Greg, but for the past year or so, we've been playing with the expansion just without the leaders.
I was going to say, though, that was my feeling on the leaders. I do like the factions, the 2 new factions. I like the idea of having more variability in how the player boards work. That is interesting to me, but that's a personal preference of mine, I think. I don't know if that's going to be true for everybody.
Right.
What about the increased variance in techs, since the tech decks are bigger?
I don't mind new techs. I honestly don't know enough about it to know as far as what techs they added to really have a definitive answer to that. But generally, my feeling is when you do that kind of thing, I would rather see replacement of cards than just adding more cards to the deck, because I would rather see a change to how the game works a little bit rather than just, oh, we've added more things that do variations on the same thing, but it doesn't really change how the game feels.
Yeah. I felt like it's a welcome addition, so I like the changes it brings. But even if it helps shape your starting strategies, which, okay, that's fine, I don't feel it's a must-have like I feel for something like Terraforming Mars Prelude. Like, I'll be happy to play Beyond the Sun without Leaders of the New Dawn.
Yeah.
I won't play Terraforming Mars without Prelude.
Well, I think the errated cards are must-haves.
Okay.
That makes sense.
But the leaders, for me, they do not add value.
What do you think about the factions?
I enjoy the factions. I've had a good time with them. They're very different than the 4 factions that come with the game.
You know, this makes me think about the fact that, like, this is what a lot of expansions do these days, though. They add new elements to the game. They just add more.
Right.
They don't add depth. They don't add variance so much as they add just more stuff. And I guess I would rather they focus on, like, oh, here's an alternate way to play the game. That's one of the things I like about what GWT is doing, because with Great Western Trail, you have your base game, and it has its expansion that, does some of the more stuff. But now you have a new version of the game with whether it's New Zealand or Argentina or I forget what the other one is. But
no, that's it.
Oh, that's it?
The 4th has not been released yet.
Oh, okay.
Right.
For Beyond the Sun is what I'd like to see them do is replace that exploration board and planets with like a different, maybe something that the topography's changed and there's some new feature in it or something like that. Okay, this is a new way to play the game. That stuff has changed. Space has changed,
Right.
Maybe jumps aren't going to, maybe you need to, there's a technology that you need to learn to get across some major rift in the galaxy or something like that.
Maybe there's aliens.
Hey, there you go. I like that, Greg.
Aren't we already the aliens? To each other.
What, you?
Okay, now we're going to be anthropomorphized animals.
Yeah, Rio Grande won't
well,
go there.
yeah, exactly. Then we're back to the problems that they went to space to avoid in the first place.
Well, but then we can create the hotel that welcomes everybody, and now we're playing Space Station Phoenix.
Well, and maybe we can have a cafe that we just have to figure out how to seat them all.
Oh, my. Oh, okay. I can't get far enough away from this one. All right. So with that in mind, most recognizable comparison. And this is going to be a tough category, I think. So what's the highest ranking game that is most like this one? You're not happy?
Well, but isn't that great, though? Isn't that? That was one of the things that I actually kind of made me a little more excited about this game when I realized this is hard. This game is that kind of unique that it's hard.
Yeah.
All right, Greg, you win. You get to go first.
So for most recognizable game, I went way back because one of the things I like about Beyond the Sun is the fact that the players kind of define how the game works. Because when you choose those technologies, those spaces become available to everybody. They have to research the technology too, but that changes the strategies that are available in the game, and it changes kind of the flavor of the game for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. And the first game that I remember that did something like that was Le Havre, where buildings,
I considered that.
The buildings that other people buy become available as actions to other players. And so it changes. I might be stuck in a hole where I don't know how I'm going to do anything with my cows. And then somebody goes and builds a slaughterhouse. And hey, I don't remember what the actual name of the building is.
Right.
But now I can make meat and leather and hides. Yeah, that feeling of other players helping define what strategies are available and what the actions you can do in the game is what I latched onto there.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it was one of the ones I considered. Good job.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
What are you not happy with, Paul? Let's hear it.
Like we discussed, Beyond the Sun stands out. It's not like any other game. So my choice for this prompt is Alien Frontiers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because it has dice And you can block people from going
Worker
to the
placement.
place that you are going, and it's in space.
And it has area control.
It does. I mean, colonization, like we talked about, is not really area control, but it kind of is.
Well, but there's an area control aspect to Beyond the Sun because whoever has the most.
At the very end of the game, right? Yeah. So Alien Frontiers is my selection.
Nice. My copy of Alien Frontiers has rocket dice.
Yes.
Wait, what?
Would that change your enjoyment of Beyond the Sun?
It could.
Okay. The one I went with, I was focusing on that shared detectory, or the idea of technology being the centerpiece of the game. And I went with innovation.
I consider that one too, yeah.
Did you?
Good job.
I thought you might have actually selected it. So I'm glad you didn't. It's not quite the same. It's not a shared detectory per se, but as you are building out your own technologies and you're displaying the cards, you're also providing the other players an opportunity to take the dogma action and be able to take advantage of what you've done. So there was a little crossover there. I couldn't find one that did it all without going too far into the extermination side of 4X. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like going with something like Twilight Imperium, well, sure, there's research and there's ships and expansion, but that also has diplomacy and a lot more combat.
Yeah, it's too contentious to be compared.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Well.
All right, so then least or less recognizable comparison. Paul, what did you have for that one?
Well, I just went back to the old well and decided to pull up High Frontier. One of my favorite games, which is, a realistic board game about space exploration. And even though in High Frontier, even though the players are competing to be the best, they are more or less working together. And to me, it has the same feel as Beyond the Sun. It just takes 2 to 3 times as long.
Right.
Or 4 or 5.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in and say that I also had High Frontier, although I did have High Frontier for All, which is the highest rated version of High Frontier.
Yes.
Yeah, the way that you are trying to draft the cards so that you can create your rocket stacks and then do your exploration is just amazing. And I love the way that you've pimped out your copy of the game.
Well, thank you.
So, Greg, what did you have?
So the caveat here is I had a hard time coming up with something.
Amen.
But I went with Starship Captains.
Which
is a fairly recent game. The comparison, obviously, there's a thematic comparison. They're both involving space exploration and science fiction. For me, the big thing was the way that the cards come out onto the mission board in the so similar to the exploration board.
Mm-hmm.
You have to travel, you have to move your ship around space, and once you take that off the board, a new one replaces it. So it kind of has a similar feel of, well, yeah, somebody else is going to get that, but something hopefully just as good is going to come out, or maybe not just as good, but something else is going to come out, another opportunity. So it doesn't really feel like they're taking stuff away from you as much because of that. And that's one of the things I like about how the colonization works in Beyond the Sun.
Right.
And Starship Captains kind of has that feel where it's like, okay, yeah, I wanted that, but when they research that, or when they complete that mission, a new one's going to come out on the board, and I just have to be ready to jump on that instead.
Got it. Okay. That's a good choice. I like that one. So house rules. Do you have any that you thought of that could improve this game? I didn't.
No, nothing. This is a solid game. Paul?
I mean, just what we've done with the expansion where we pick and choose what to take out of it.
Right. Okay. But then I don't consider those to be house rules because they're expansion rules.
Right.
So if this game is being played at game night, what do you want to play afterwards? And if you consider this to be a light enough game, I guess you could pick one to play before. But what did you have for this one? Greg?
So I actually want to say what comes before it because and that's going to be, for me, it's going to be Anno 1800 because I like the idea of like, oh, we're just building up technology and then we just jump into space after fun. They also feel like they're very different in play style, but they feel kind of a similar niche of like being pretty quick to play. And then, we can finish both of them in a night. We've done it before. I don't remember which order we did it in, but it was a really satisfying night.
True.
Okay. Yeah, I can see the similarity there.
Yeah, Anno was another game I considered for most well-known similar game.
Right. Paul, how about you?
Well, similar to Greg, I thought of just continuing the theme, and once we're spacefaring, why not set up that hotel and invite aliens to stay on it with Space Station Phoenix?
So that's why you were laughing earlier.
Yes. And they're both Rio Grande games, and they were published within a few years of each other. So
Yeah.
I just think it fits.
It does.
I can see it, yeah.
I'm going to stay with Rio Grande games and space, but I'm going to go with a bunch of custom colored dice. I'm going to go with Roll for the Galaxy.
Okay.
Would be my second game after this.
Got it.
Much to Dave's chagrin.
So you need a palate cleanser after.
Yes, I do. So what feature of the game still stands out to you? What has aged the best? And I want to say this is a rhetorical question. It is for me. I think there is an obvious answer,
Well,
and I went with it.
first.
So I'll let. No.
Really? Because to me, there's just so many things.
Yeah,
Are there
I
really?
agree. So please, I want to hear your default answer.
It's the shared tech tree. How can it not be? But okay, I think it's the most dominant. It has the largest board. It's the most interesting part of the game. So I'm really interested to hear alternate ideas.
I agree with you. I also really like the production
Okay, Paul
mechanism.
took mine.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I think that, but that's just it. It has the shared tech tree, which is kind of new and feels fresh. It has the production, and it also has this other exploration board, which maybe not as innovative, but it's also kind of unique. It works a little differently than most other.
Right.
Because there isn't a fighting, there is a area control, but that only lasts until the planet's colonized, and then now you have new opportunities. So for me, all of that though it's an ever-changing environment that demands flexibility. So I think if you like games that force you to be quick on your feet and be flexible with your plan, but still have a solid strategy, this is a game for you. This is a great game.
Yeah, so I want to add on to what I was saying about the production mechanism.
Sorry, I stepped on.
No, it's all
No
good.
worries. Because Eclipse has a very similar production mechanism, but what I think Beyond the Sun improves on it is by having the variable stacks of goods cubes above your production.
Right. By player board.
Each faction has a different specialty when it comes to producing their goods and when they produce them, whether it's early or late. And I think that's really brilliant.
Yeah, and then also what those cubes become can be so variable. Anything, a worker that goes and researches something to, a level 4 ship that's able to colonize the planet.
Right.
Yeah, it's an amazingly innovative game.
Agreed. What feature of the game now disappoints? What hasn't aged as well? Any thoughts here? Greg, I'll let you go first so we don't steal yours.
No, he really didn't steal it, but it was an aspect of what I wanted to touch on. So for me, I would say if you don't like keeping track of a complex game state and keeping other players from running away with something, and we've touched on this a lot, and it happened in the game you just played. You have to keep an eye on what other players are doing. You can't just focus on your game. You have to follow what other people are doing and be able to keep that all in your head. I don't know, not to keep it in your head, but keep awareness of it. If you don't like that level of complexity or depth, whatever it is, then you're not going to like this.
Fair. Yeah, there is a lot to keep track of, and that's going to tie in a little bit to what I have. But Paul, what was your answer?
Technically, there's nothing I am disappointed about with this game.
Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
mine was
maybe the theme. I would say the theme disappoints me, but as far as the game goes,
what would you rethink?
It's better and better.
What would make you feel more positive about the theme?
He wants little quips on every card. He wants better pictures and a background story.
I think a background story would have really thrilled me. Yes.
Some lore on the cards, and then the rocket-shaped dice.
I mean, it doesn't have to be, but the what's the word from the Dominion podcast? Gosh.
Resonant?
Yes. An overarching story could have instilled resonance into the card titles and their effects to create something that really sucked me in thematically.
Yeah. Props to Donald X for that little tidbit.
Yes.
I said for me, the thing that I didn't like was the exploration board. And it's because at first it feels vestigial. It is a separate board. It is a smaller board and it's easy to overlook it when in fact it's tightly integrated and you need to keep that in mind. I feel the same way about the cult board in Terra Mystica. Like it's so easy to get focused on getting my buildings and terraforming the spaces around it and keeping my area contiguous on the map and then forgetting that I'm supposed to also be advancing on the cult board because that's a separate thing. And I don't know how they do it or if they come up with some obnoxious 3x3 fold board like Darwin's Journey has, but there should have been a way to integrate these two things.
Yeah. Well, but they were busy worrying about giving you a dynamic player board as well, where you had to balance things there,
really
too.
I'm surprised to hear you say that, Todd, because I think the separate boards are very egalitarian to all gamers' table types.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. Paul mentioned like he didn't really have anything to complain. And I really kind of feel that way about this game. I don't know that it's my favorite game of all time, but it's not much wrong with this game to really pick on. And it really is more a preferential thing that it would be somebody who doesn't want to have to deal with all these different player board and off.
Right.
Somebody who's just, that's too much. I want to just focus in one area. But these days, a lot of games come with all that stuff, multiple boards and player boards. And it's just
fair enough.
Part of the landscape these days.
Well, I'm picking nits here, so...
Same here.
So did this game replace a previous one for you? And it didn't for me, not that I can compare it to.
Agreed. I got nothing as far as games that have been replaced.
All right. How about you, Greg?
Yeah, I think just thematically, it would replace something like Race for the Galaxy for me, Like if I want to play a space exploration game, competing factions, this is it. I don't want to play Race for the Galaxy or Roll for the Galaxy for that matter as much anymore. But yeah, it is such a unique game. It doesn't really replace things mechanically. It's a really unique game.
Agreed. So then has this game since been replaced? And if so, by what?
Not at all.
Nope.
I also had not really, but it does feel like Space Station Phoenix stands on the same corner. And I don't know if it's just they're both Rio Grande space-based games released within 2 years of each other. They are both unique. They're both original. And for some reason, for me, I conflate the two fairly easily.
Interesting. Yeah. Space Station Phoenix definitely replaced the game for me, but it was not Beyond the Sun.
What was it?
It was Carnegie.
We're ranting. Yeah.
We already did that Carnegie episode.
Yeah.
Right? So then soundtrack. What music would you want to listen to while playing Beyond the Sun? Paul?
Yeah, so I went with video game music.
Oh, there you go.
And I would really enjoy listening to the soundtrack music for the game Stellaris.
Oh.
While playing this.
That's a great pick. Now you make me want to play Stellaris again.
Nice.
Greg, what'd you have?
I'm going with the For All Mankind soundtrack by Jeff Russo. It's great. It's kind of ethereal, hopeful, a little bit of adventurousness into it. It's got all the things that I want when I'm thinking about space exploration.
Another great pick. And I hummed those opening notes when we were watching it. That's another great pick. I've got an answer here that would make Dave proud. Because I found an album from 1983 that was released by Brian Eno. And Brian is one of the founding members of the British band Roxy Music, so that's what Dave would have gotten a kick out of before he left due to differences with Brian Ferry. But the album is named Apollo, and it is full of ambient spacescapes. So it would be great to have just playing in the background without being too, having too much chunky brass highlight moments.
Right? I mean, the first thing I looked into was the Interstellar soundtrack, and then I was like, nope.
Hey, but I loves me some Hans Zimmer.
True.
So on a scale of 1 to 10 now, how would you rate Beyond the Sun? And I feel like I'm going to try to get this done from lowest to highest. We lucked into this, I think, on our last episode. So I'm going to let Paul go first.
All right. Well, the more I play, the more I like this game. It is currently rated at an 8 for me.
Okay. And I also had it as an 8. And I am susceptible to tech tree games. And I think this one just absolutely shines in that respect. So I gave it an 8. Greg?
Yeah, I wanted to put this at a 9, but it is an 8 for me as well. And it boils down to I worry that it sometimes can feel a little bit samey. So I want to keep a little space between games to not kind of get any kind of fatigue with it, because it is such a great game and it is a lot of fun. And every game state is different. It just has like the feel of it can be the same if you play it too much in too short a stretch.
Sure. Because each position, your choices are very limited,
Yeah.
but it can grow into something completely different. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
So one of the things that I think is interesting, because I want to talk about tech trees real quick, and you might have seen this in the show notes. If you look at that mechanism on Board Game Geek, there are 327 games that are linked to it.
Not a lot.
Not a lot, right? And in the top 20, there are 8 of them. So without having a large representation
Overall,
there's a disproportionately high percentage, 40%, that have it in the top 20 games. And compare that to worker placement. Worker placement has 3,598 games linked to it. And in the top 20, Dune Imperium. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, now that you say that, I'm looking at the top 100 games with tech trees, and there's some really good ones in here. some games I love that I have not played in a while.
I think it just tells you that it's hard to make a good tech tree.
But when done right...
it's stellar. Yeah. No pun intended.
No, please, pun intended. Well done, sir. All right. So we all gave it an 8 on a rating. Finally, is it replayable, and how soon would you want to revisit this game? Greg?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, again, I like the addition of some additional factions. I like the changing of the starting state and the kind of the extra challenge of working with that. But every game is so different from the last as far as how it actually plays out. And it's just a lot of fun. And it's unlike anything else that we play.
Agreed. And Paul?
Yeah, ditto. It is currently, I believe, our group's number 1 pick for when we only have 90 minutes to play something.
Yeah, definitely it's a go-to game for us right now when we're just looking for like something to fill.
Right.
And an easy decision that everybody's going to say yes to.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I also had it down as definitely replayable. But I'd also like to see, again, nitpicking here, if we can get it down to 60 to 75 minutes, it would be amazing. And I'm hoping that that's just a fluency issue and that we can actually get it there.
Three player, I'd say definitely.
Right.
I don't know about 4.
I don't know about, definitely not about 4, because there's so many of those pivotal moments in the game, especially when somebody takes the action you needed. And
right. I know that I definitely appreciate it when we're playing that you guys are making sure that I'm not missing something, like adding a second disc to a planet I just colonized.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things I love about our group is that we want everybody to be performing at their best and not miss stupid things that, you're going to be 10 seconds later going,
Right.
Play fast, make mistakes.
Yeah, and just
play again.
Have a little bit of groupthink to help people not make stupid mistakes.
All right. And with that, we've added a 3rd disc on the achievement cards.
Wait, is it 3rd or the 4th?
Well, we're playing 3 players.
We're playing 3 player. Exactly. And way to force me to leave in being wrong on the edit. All right. For our next episode, we're staying in space with a favorite from 2007. Hey, guys, I know this was a hard one to get scheduled and recorded. I really appreciate you making the time tonight. This was a lot of fun.
You too.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to Replayable. Support for our podcast comes from listeners like you. You can find us online at replayable.fm, on Twitter as replayable.fm, and on Instagram as replayable.fm. You can also join our team at patreon.com/replayable. Thank you for your support. We welcome your feedback, which is the only way that we are going to get better. You can get in touch with us via email at feedback@replayable.fm. And if you're interested in sponsoring us, then please contact us at sponsors@replayable.fm.